He gave his wife $40 a week and held her best friend's hand while signing the divorce. He thought that was the end of her story, but 3 months later, the same woman he humiliated became worth $30 million. And the man who laughed in that courtroom would soon be begging while the police read him his rights. The courtroom felt colder than it should have been. Alicia Carter stood there, silent, still, unbroken. 10 years of her life reduced to one number, $40 a week. Across from her, Marcus didn't even look up, because he didn't need to. He had already replaced her. Vanessa stood beside him, the same woman who once called Alicia family, now standing where Alicia used to belong, and somehow they both looked comfortable. He gave his wife $40 a week and held her best friend's hand while signing the divorce papers. 3 months later, that same decision would cost him everything. Rain pressed against the courthouse windows, blurring the city outside into streaks of gray and shadow. Alicia Carter stood in the center of the courtroom, silent and still, like someone who had already taken the hit and was just waiting for the pain to catch up. She was a 35-year-old black woman with deep brown skin and a tall, slender frame that carried both strength and exhaustion at the same time. Her posture was straight out of habit, not pride. Years of holding everything together had trained her body to stay upright even when everything inside her felt like it was collapsing. Her dark, tightly coiled hair was pulled back neatly, revealing sharp cheekbones and tired eyes that had seen too many sleepless nights. Alicia had always been the kind of woman who gave more than she kept, someone who believed loyalty could build a life, that patience could fix what love broke. Beside her stood Jaden Carter, her 6-year-old son, small fingers wrapped tightly around hers. He had her eyes, wide, observant, quietly searching for answers no child should have to ask. His brown skin glowed softly under the courtroom lights, and his short curls framed a face that still carried innocence, though it was already beginning to crack under confusion. Jaden didn't fully understand what was happening, but he understood enough to know something was ending. Across from them stood Marcus Carter, 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, and composed in a way that felt almost rehearsed. Marcus looked like a man who had already moved on long before this day arrived. His dark skin was smooth, his beard trimmed sharply along his jawline, and his tailored suit fit him perfectly, like the life Alicia had helped him build had finally shaped him into someone he believed was too important to look back. Marcus had once been ambitious in a way that felt inspiring, the kind of man who talked about building a future, about creating something bigger than himself. But somewhere along the way, after failed cases, after pressure, after tasting just enough success, his ambition had hardened into something colder, something that no longer needed Alicia in the picture. And standing beside him was Vanessa Reed. Vanessa was a white woman in her early 30s, slim and polished, with long, straight blonde hair that fell neatly over her shoulders and pale skin that almost seemed untouched by the world Alicia had been fighting through. Her features were soft, carefully composed, the kind of beauty that didn't demand attention, but quietly held it. She wore a fitted cream dress, elegant without trying too hard, and her posture was relaxed, too relaxed for someone standing in the middle of another woman's marriage ending. Vanessa had always been close to Alicia once, close enough to share secrets, to hold Jaden as a baby, to sit at Alicia's kitchen table and laugh like family. But Vanessa had learned early in life that proximity to comfort mattered more than loyalty, and when Marcus began to rise, she chose the side that would rise with him. "Let's proceed," a voice cut through the tension. Daniel Hargrove, Marcus's attorney, stepped forward, a middle-aged man with thinning gray hair and a permanent look of quiet superiority. He carried himself like someone who had spent decades turning people's worst moments into routine victories. His eyes barely lingered on Alicia. She wasn't someone he needed to impress, only someone he needed to finish. "Given the circumstances," he said smoothly, glancing down at the documents, "my client will be providing child support in the amount of $40 per week." $40. The number landed without echo, but it filled the entire room. Alicia didn't react immediately, not because she didn't understand, but because she did. 10 years of marriage. 10 years of building, sacrificing, adjusting her life around his, working extra shifts when money was tight, putting her own ambitions on hold so Marcus could chase his, loving him when he had nothing, believing in him when no one else did. Reduced to $40. Jaden's hand tightened in hers. "Mom," he whispered softly. Alicia swallowed, her throat dry, but she didn't look down. If she did, she knew she might break, and breaking here, in front of Marcus, in front of Vanessa, would be the one thing she refused to give them. Across the room, Marcus signed the papers. No hesitation, no pause, just a smooth movement of ink across paper, like this moment had already been decided long before today. He didn't look at Alicia, not once. Instead, he leaned slightly toward Vanessa, murmuring something low enough that only she could hear. Vanessa smiled. It wasn't a loud smile, not cruel in the obvious way, but it was comfortable, like she belonged there. And somehow, that hurt more than anything else, because it meant this wasn't chaos, it was replacement. Alicia's grip tightened, her nails pressing into her palm just enough to remind her she was still here, still standing. Inside her, something shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but in a way that felt permanent. She had spent years believing love meant staying, that loyalty meant enduring, that if she just held on long enough, things would come back together. But standing here now, she saw it clearly for the first time. Marcus hadn't just left her. He had outgrown the version of her that helped him rise, and replaced her with someone who fit the life he wanted next. "Do you accept the terms?" Daniel asked. The room waited. Alicia lifted her eyes slowly and looked directly at Marcus. Not at the man she married, not at the man she once loved, but at the man standing in front of her now, someone who looked familiar but felt completely different. And in that moment, something inside her didn't break. It closed. She gave a small, almost invisible nod. No tears, no argument, no begging, just silence. Because deep down, she understood something Marcus didn't. This wasn't the end of her story. It was the part he thought he controlled. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing the city in quiet, steady drops. Inside, Alicia Carter walked out of the courtroom with nothing in her hands, and everything he had underestimated. Because what Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't see yet, was that in exactly 3 months, the woman he had just reduced to $40 a week would become the one thing he could never afford again. And when that day came, would he beg, or would it already be too late? For 90 days, she survived on $40 a week, not because it was enough, but because she had no other choice. The first night after the divorce, Alicia Carter didn't cry. She packed. Not neatly, not completely, just enough to leave before the landlord knocked again. The apartment she once called home no longer felt like hers anyway. The walls still held echoes of arguments, of silence, of things that had been breaking long before they officially ended. She moved quickly, folding clothes into 2 worn suitcases while Jaden sat quietly on the edge of the bed, watching her with the kind of stillness children learn when they sense something is wrong but don't know how to fix it. By the end of the week, they were gone. The new place was smaller than anything Alicia had ever lived in, a single-room rental tucked behind a laundromat on the edge of a quieter, forgotten part of the city. The air smelled faintly of detergent and damp walls, and the flickering ceiling light buzzed softly like it was barely holding on. The bed was too small, the window barely opened, and the kitchen was nothing more than a sink and a rusted stove. But it was what she could afford. During the day, Alicia worked as a cleaner at a downtown office building. The uniform, a plain gray shirt and dark pants, hung loosely on her now thinner frame, her movements efficient, mechanical. She moved through empty hallways and glass-walled offices, wiping down desks that belonged to people who earned in a day what she struggled to make in a week. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, her quiet nature blending into the background. The job supervisor, Mrs. Delgado, a short, middle-aged Latina woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, watched Alicia closely at first, but quickly realized something about her. Alicia didn't complain, didn't slow down, didn't ask for anything. That kind of silence wasn't weakness, it was endurance. At night, Alicia worked at a small diner called Rusty Spoon. The place was old but busy, filled with the smell of grease and coffee that never quite faded. The owner, Hank Miller, was a stocky white man in his late 50s with a thick gray mustache and a permanent frown that softened only when he saw people trying harder than expected. Years ago, losing his wife had made him quieter, less trusting, but he had a soft spot for people who kept going anyway. Alicia reminded him of that. So he gave her extra shifts, not out of kindness, but out of recognition. By the time Alicia got home each night, her feet ached and her hands smelled like chemicals and dish soap. But she never let Jaden see that part. Dinner was simple. Most nights, it was instant noodles. Jaden never complained. That was the hardest part. One evening, as they sat on the edge of the bed eating from plastic bowls, Jaden looked up at her, his voice small but clear. "Mom, why is Dad happy without us?" The question landed harder than anything else had. Alicia paused, her chopsticks hovering mid-air. For a second, she didn't breathe. Not because she didn't have an answer, but because no answer felt fair. Not to him, not to the truth. She forced a small smile. "Sometimes people don't understand what they have," she said softly. Jaden nodded slowly, as if trying to make sense of something bigger than his years. But Alicia knew. He wasn't convinced, and neither was she. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The money never stretched far enough. The fridge was often empty except for a bottle of water and a few leftovers. Bills stacked quietly on the corner of the table, each one a reminder that survival wasn't the same as stability. Alicia stopped looking at her reflection because it reminded her how much she was losing. Weight, sleep, pieces of herself she didn't have time to recover. But she kept going, because stopping wasn't an option. As the third month approached, something else crept in. Not hope, not yet, but a quiet numbness, the kind that comes when pain becomes routine. Alicia no longer expected things to get better. She only expected to get through the next day, and then the next. Her birthday was coming, 35. The number felt heavier than it should have, not because of age, but because of everything she thought she would have by now. A stable home, a family, a life that made sense. Instead, she had a room, a job that barely covered anything, and a son who was learning too early how fragile things could be. That night, Alicia sat alone after Jaden fell asleep. The room was quiet, except for the distant hum of machines from the laundromat. She didn't have a cake, didn't have candles, didn't even have enough money left to pretend it mattered. She stared at her phone. No messages, not from friends, not from family, and definitely not from Marcus. For the first time in weeks, her chest tightened, not from exhaustion, but from something deeper. Not sadness, not anger, emptiness. She leaned back against the wall, closing her eyes, letting the silence settle around her. 10 years, gone. And in 90 days, she had lost everything she built, everything she believed in, everything she thought would last. But what Alicia didn't realize, what she couldn't possibly see yet, was that this wasn't where her story ended. This was where it was being rewritten. Because the next morning, on the day she thought no one remembered, someone would knock on her door. And that knock would change everything. The next morning, the woman who had nothing would be handed everything. On the morning she turned 35, a woman with nothing opened her door and stepped into a life worth $30 million. The knock came just after sunrise. Not loud, not aggressive, just certain. Alicia Carter froze where she stood, one hand still resting on the edge of the sink, the other holding a chipped mug that had long since lost its color. For a second, she thought she imagined it. No one came here. No one visited this part of the city unless they had to. Then the knock came again. 3 steady taps. Jaden stirred behind her, still half asleep on the small bed. "Mom, someone's there." Alicia's chest tightened. Instinct, not fear, just the quiet awareness that nothing good had come easily lately. She set the mug down and walked toward the door slowly, her bare feet cold against the worn floor. Every step felt heavier than it should. When she opened the door, everything changed. A long black limousine stretched across the narrow street outside, its polished surface reflecting the peeling walls of the building like something out of place, too clean, too expensive, too deliberate. Neighbors had already begun to gather at their windows, curtains shifting, eyes watching. And standing directly in front of her was a woman who clearly did not belong here. She was tall, nearly Alicia's height, but carried herself with a kind of effortless authority that made her seem taller. Her skin was a smooth, warm caramel tone, her features sharp and defined, with high cheekbones and piercing dark eyes that missed nothing. Her hair was styled into a sleek, low bun, not a strand out of place, and her tailored navy suit fit her like it had been designed specifically for her body. She looked like someone who had spent her life walking into rooms where decisions were made and leaving with control of them. "Ms. Alicia Carter," the woman said, her voice calm, precise. "My name is Lorraine Whitmore." She extended a gloved hand. Alicia didn't take it. Not yet. Lorraine didn't seem offended. If anything, she expected hesitation. Her expression didn't change, just a slight tilt of the head, as if adjusting to Alicia's pace rather than forcing her own. Lorraine Whitmore was the kind of woman shaped by decades in high-stakes environments, corporate law, inheritance disputes, silent negotiations that decided millions without ever raising voices. Years ago, losing a case that cost her client everything had taught her one thing: never underestimate the quiet ones. And Alicia, standing barefoot in a doorway with nothing, was exactly that. "We've been looking for you," Lorraine continued. The words landed softly, but they carried weight. Alicia frowned slightly, her brows pulling together. "I think you have the wrong person." Lorraine's lips curved, just slightly, not a smile, recognition. "No," she said, "we don't." She reached into a leather folder and pulled out a document, crisp and official, the kind of paper Alicia hadn't touched in years. "May I come in?" There was a pause. Alicia glanced behind her, at the room, the peeling paint, the single bed, the life she had been surviving in for 90 days. Then back at Lorraine. For reasons she couldn't explain, she stepped aside. Lorraine entered without hesitation, her eyes scanning the room once, not with judgment, but with assessment. She noticed everything: the empty fridge, the stacked bills, the way Jaden watched her carefully from the bed, protective even at his age. "Hello," Lorraine said gently to him. Jaden didn't respond. He just looked at Alicia. Alicia nodded slightly. "It's okay." Lorraine turned back, placing the document on the small table. "I'll be direct," she said, "because what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible." Alicia crossed her arms instinctively, bracing herself. Lorraine opened the folder. "Your grandmother, Evelyn Carter, passed away 3 weeks ago." Alicia blinked. "My grandmother is dead," she said quietly. "She died years ago." Lorraine shook her head once. "No, she disappeared." Silence filled the room. Alicia felt something shift, but not understanding. Something deeper. "She didn't disappear," Lorraine continued. "She built something, quietly, strategically, and she left very clear instructions." Lorraine slid the document forward. Alicia hesitated before picking it up. Her hands were steady, but her mind wasn't. "You are listed," Lorraine said, her voice even, "as the sole beneficiary of her estate." Alicia let out a small breath. That didn't make sense. Nothing about this made sense. "How much?" she asked, almost without meaning to. Lorraine didn't hesitate. $30 million. The room went still. Not the kind of silence that passes, the kind that changes shape. Jaden looked between them, confused. Alicia didn't move, didn't speak, didn't react the way Lorraine had seen countless others react before. No gasp, no disbelief out loud, just stillness. Because Alicia had spent the last 90 days surviving a life where numbers stopped meaning anything, and now a number had just changed everything. "There is a condition," Lorraine added. Alicia finally looked up. "Your grandmother believed," Lorraine said slowly, "that wealth should never be given to someone who hasn't been tested." Alicia's grip tightened slightly on the paper. She required that you reach the age of 35 and that you endure a significant personal loss. Lorraine paused. Her eyes met Alicia's. You meet both conditions. Alicia felt something cold move through her chest. Not fear, recognition, like this moment had been waiting for her. Outside, the limousine engine hummed softly, still running. Inside, Alicia looked down at the document again. $30 million, a life she didn't recognize, a future she hadn't imagined, and behind all of it, a past she didn't fully understand. She lifted her eyes slowly. "Why me?" she asked. Lorraine's expression didn't change, but her answer did. "Because," she said quietly, "your grandmother didn't want to leave money. She wanted to choose a survivor." The words settled deep. Alicia glanced at Jaden, then back at the paper, then at the door. Everything she had just lost stood on one side. Everything she didn't understand yet waited on the other. And for the first time in months, she had a choice. But if she stepped into that car, would she just change her life or uncover a truth that would destroy everything she thought she knew? $30 million. Doesn't change your life. It reveals the life that was hidden from you. The city looked different from inside the limousine, cleaner, quieter. Like the world Alicia Carter had been surviving in for the past 3 months, existed on a completely separate layer, one she was now watching from behind tinted glass. She sat upright, hands resting on her lap, not touching anything, not relaxing, as if the moment she leaned back this reality might disappear. Jaden sat beside her, eyes wide, pressing his small palm gently against the window, fascinated by everything he didn't yet understand. Across from them sat Lorraine Whitmore, composed as always, her posture unchanged, her gaze steady but observant. She had seen this transition before, the shift between disbelief and acceptance, but Alicia was different. Most people ask questions immediately. Alicia absorbed. The car came to a stop in front of a tall glass building downtown, its exterior reflecting the morning light like a mirror too clean to belong to the same city Alicia had just left behind. Inside, everything was quiet, controlled, expensive without needing to prove it. Lorraine led them into a private office on the top floor. Waiting there was another man. He stood as they entered, tall and lean, his movements precise, like someone trained to minimize error in every detail. His skin was dark, his features angular, with a neatly trimmed beard that framed a sharp jawline. His hair was cut short, clean, and his suit, dark blue, almost black, fit him with exacting precision. His eyes, however, were what defined him, calm, calculating, and patient. "Ms. Carter," he said, his voice low and measured. "My name is Nathaniel Brooks." He extended his hand. Alicia shook it this time. His grip was firm, but not dominant, controlled. Nathaniel had built his reputation as a financial executor for high-net-worth estates, a man who didn't just manage money, he protected it. Years earlier, after watching his own family lose everything due to poor inheritance handling, he had dedicated his career to ensuring that wealth transferred with intention, not chaos. He was not easily impressed, but as he looked at Alicia, there was something there. Interest. "Please," he gestured toward the chair. Alicia sat slowly. Jaden stayed close, his small hand brushing against her arm. Lorraine placed the folder in front of her again. "This," Nathaniel said, opening it, "is your grandmother's estate portfolio." He turned the pages deliberately. Properties, investments, holdings, numbers Alicia couldn't process fast enough. "You are the sole heir," he said clearly, "to a $30 million estate." The words sounded the same, but this time they settled differently. Alicia exhaled slowly, shaking her head once. "You must have the wrong person," she said, her voice quiet but steady. Nathaniel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he slid a photograph across the table. A woman stood in the image, older, powerful, unmistakably commanding. Her skin was deep and rich, her posture straight, her gaze direct. Her hair, streaked with gray, was styled in a way that balanced elegance and authority. She wore a tailored suit, similar to Lorraine's, but sharper, more intentional. The kind of presence that didn't enter rooms, it changed them. "This," Nathaniel said, "is Evelyn Carter." Alicia stared at the photo, her breath caught, because beneath the years, she recognized her. "Your grandmother," Lorraine added softly, "was one of the most discreet real estate investors in this city. She built her empire quietly. No interviews, no press, no public identity." Alicia's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the table. "But why hide it?" she asked. Nathaniel's expression shifted, just slightly. "Because visibility attracts risk," he said, and she understood that power doesn't need attention to exist. He turned another page. Evelyn Carter spent decades acquiring undervalued properties, restoring them, and holding them long-term. Entire blocks of this city quietly belonged to her. Alicia leaned back slightly. This wasn't just money. This was control. "But if she had all of this," Alicia's voice lowered, "why didn't she help us?" The room went still. Lorraine answered this time. "Because she wasn't looking for someone who needed help," she said. "She was looking for someone who could survive without it." Alicia's chest tightened. Nathaniel nodded once. "She left very specific conditions," he continued. "You must reach the age of 35, and," he paused, "you must endure a significant personal betrayal." The word lingered. Betrayal. Alicia didn't move, didn't react, but something inside her aligned, like a piece of a puzzle she didn't know existed had just clicked into place. "She didn't want to give money to someone comfortable," Lorraine said quietly. Nathaniel finished the thought. "She wanted to give power to someone who survived." Silence. Heavy. Real. Alicia looked down at the documents again, but this time she wasn't seeing numbers. She was seeing everything she had just gone through. The nights, the hunger, the humiliation. It wasn't random. It wasn't meaningless. It was qualifying her. Jaden shifted slightly beside her, leaning against her arm. She looked at him, then back at the table. $30 million, a legacy built in silence, a condition built on pain, and a choice that would change everything moving forward. Nathaniel closed the folder gently. "If you choose to accept," he said, "we begin the transfer immediately." Alicia didn't answer right away, because for the first time, this wasn't about survival. This was about power. And power came with consequences she hadn't even begun to understand. She lifted her head slowly. "Tell me everything," she said. Lorraine and Nathaniel exchanged a brief glance, because they both knew, once she stepped into this world, there was no going back. But what Alicia didn't know was that the moment her name entered those records, someone else would see it too. And when they did, would they come back for her, or come after everything she had just inherited? The moment her name hit $30 million, the man who gave her 40 came running back. Marcus Carter didn't hear it from her. He heard it from a client, the kind of client who talked too much when money was involved. "Hey, isn't Alicia Carter your ex-wife?" the man had asked casually, leaning back in his chair across Marcus's office desk. "Because I just heard that name tied to a massive estate transfer. Big one, like 30 million big." Marcus laughed at first, a short, dismissive laugh, because in his mind, Alicia was still standing in that courtroom, silent, small, reduced to $40 a week. But then the client kept talking. Property records, legal filings, a name that matched exactly, Alicia Carter. And just like that, the room shifted. Marcus didn't say much after that, didn't need to. He dismissed the client early, his mind already racing ahead, piecing things together faster than he could control. He walked over to his office window, staring out at the city, his jaw tightening slightly, the calm confidence he usually carried beginning to crack at the edges. 30 million. That wasn't luck. That was power. And power changed everything. Marcus had always believed he understood Alicia, that she was predictable, loyal, the kind of woman who would stay, who would endure, who would never walk away no matter how far he pushed. That belief had shaped every decision he made, especially the one that ended their marriage. But now, he wasn't so sure anymore. Across the room, Vanessa Reed sat on the edge of his desk, watching him carefully. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes weren't. They were sharp, calculating, reading every shift in his expression. Vanessa had always been good at that, understanding people not by what they said, but by what they couldn't hide. Growing up in a household where stability depended on adapting quickly, she had learned to recognize opportunity before it disappeared. And right now, she saw it. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. Marcus didn't answer immediately. That was answer enough. Vanessa straightened slightly, crossing her arms. "So what are you thinking?" Marcus turned slowly, his expression already changing. Not confused, not shocked, focused. Because Marcus didn't see problems, he saw angles. "She's still my wife," he said. Vanessa's brows lifted slightly. "Ex-wife," she corrected. Marcus shook his head once. "Paperwork doesn't erase history." Vanessa didn't respond right away, but something in her posture shifted, because she understood what that meant, and she didn't like it. By the time Marcus arrived at Alicia's building, the sun was already low, casting long shadows across the narrow street. The limousine was gone. The street looked exactly the same as it always had, worn, quiet, unremarkable. But Marcus knew better now. He stepped out of his car, adjusting his jacket, his movements controlled, deliberate. To anyone watching, he looked the same as always, composed, confident, untouchable. But inside, something else had taken over. Urgency. He walked up to the door and knocked. Once. Then again. Harder. Inside, Alicia froze. She had just put Jaden to bed. The room was quiet, the air still holding the weight of everything that had changed that day. The documents were still on the table. The number, 30 million, still didn't feel real. The knock came again, louder this time. She knew that knock. Her body recognized it before her mind did. Alicia walked to the door slowly, her expression unreadable, her hand steady as she reached for the handle. When she opened it, Marcus stood there. Same posture, same presence, but his eyes were different. Less certain, more searching. "Alicia," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. Not commanding, not dismissive. Careful. "Can we talk?" For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them felt heavier than it should. Then Alicia stepped slightly into the doorway, blocking the space behind her. There was no invitation. Marcus noticed. Of course he did. "I heard about today," he continued, his tone measured, "and I think maybe we need to rethink things." Alicia didn't respond. She just looked at him, really looked at him, not as the man she used to love, not as the father of her child, but as someone standing in front of her because of what she had now. And for the first time, she saw it clearly. Not regret, not love, opportunity. "Baby," Marcus said, taking a small step forward, his voice lowering. "We made mistakes, both of us, but we can fix this, for Jaden, for us." The word us hung in the air. Alicia's eyes didn't move, her face didn't change, but inside, everything was different, because she remembered. The courtroom, the $40, the smile Vanessa gave him, the silence he left her in. And suddenly, this moment made sense, not as reconciliation, but as calculation. Alicia stepped forward slightly, just enough that the light from inside fell fully across her face. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm, clear, final. "You didn't want me at my worst." Marcus's expression shifted, just slightly. "You don't get me at my best." Silence. Marcus blinked once, not expecting that, not prepared for that, because this wasn't the Alicia he left. This was someone else, someone who didn't need him, someone who saw through him. And for the first time, Marcus felt something unfamiliar. Loss. Not of her, but of control. Alicia held his gaze for one more second. Then slowly, she closed the door. The sound was quiet, but it echoed. Marcus stood there, unmoving, staring at the door like it might open again. But it didn't. And behind that door, Alicia turned away, not shaking, not breaking, walking back into a life that no longer included him. But what Marcus didn't know was that losing Alicia would be the smallest consequence of what was coming next, because the same money that brought him back was about to expose everything he had tried to hide. And when that truth surfaced, would he beg again, or would there be no one left to listen? The man who begged at her door wasn't just a liar, he was a criminal, and she had just inherited the proof. The folder didn't look dangerous. It was slim, neatly bound, the kind of document Alicia Carter had seen 100 times in passing, but never truly understood. But as it sat on the polished glass table in Nathaniel Brooks' office, it carried a weight far heavier than $30 million, because this time, it wasn't about what she gained. It was about what Marcus had been hiding. Alicia sat upright, her posture calm, her face unreadable. The transformation was subtle, but it was there. The woman who once stood silent in court had learned something in the past few days. Control wasn't loud. It didn't beg. It didn't react. It waited. Across from her, Nathaniel opened the file with precise movements, each page turned with intention. Lorraine Whitmore stood slightly behind him, arms folded, her sharp eyes fixed on Alicia, not to intimidate, but to measure. "You should see this," Nathaniel said quietly. Alicia didn't reach for the file immediately. "Start talking," she replied. Nathaniel nodded once. "Marcus Carter has been operating outside legal boundaries for at least 3 years." The words didn't shock her, not yet, but something inside her tightened. Nathaniel slid the first document forward. "Client settlements," he continued, "personal injury cases, insurance payouts." Alicia glanced down. Numbers, names, amounts. "At first glance, everything looks legitimate," Nathaniel said. "But when you follow the transfers," he tapped the page, "the money doesn't go where it's supposed to." Alicia's eyes narrowed slightly. "Where does it go?" Nathaniel didn't hesitate. "Into accounts he controls, shell accounts, redirected funds." The room felt colder. Lorraine stepped forward this time, placing another document on the table. "Victims," she said simply. Alicia's gaze shifted. Photos, people. An elderly man with sunken eyes, a woman holding a child, a young couple standing in what looked like a hospital hallway. "These are people who trusted him," Lorraine added, "people who thought he was fighting for them." Alicia's jaw tightened. "How much?" she asked. Nathaniel answered without hesitation. "Hundreds of thousands, possibly more." The silence that followed was different from before, heavier, because this wasn't about betrayal anymore. This was about damage, real damage. "And Vanessa?" Alicia asked, her voice lower now. Nathaniel turned another page. "She knew," he said, "and in some cases, she helped." Alicia looked up sharply. "How?" Lorraine answered. "Account management, transfers, communication with certain clients. She wasn't just involved, she was useful." Alicia leaned back slowly. The pieces were aligning now. The gifts, the trips, the sudden changes in Marcus's lifestyle. None of it had been earned. It had been taken. Jaden's face flashed in her mind. The nights they ate instant noodles, the empty fridge, the silence, while Marcus was building a life with stolen money. Alicia's fingers pressed lightly against the table, grounding herself. Not from shock, from clarity. "So it wasn't just me," she said quietly. Her voice didn't shake, her eyes didn't soften. "He ruins everyone." No one responded immediately, because there was nothing to add to that. It was already complete. Nathaniel closed the folder slowly. "We can take this to the authorities," he said, "but once we do, it won't stay quiet." Alicia looked at him. "What does that mean?" Lorraine stepped in again, her tone direct. "It means investigation, exposure, court, media possibly." Alicia nodded slightly. She understood. This wasn't just about justice. This was about consequence. And consequences had a way of pulling everything into the light. "Why show me this?" Alicia asked. Nathaniel didn't hesitate. "Because your name is now tied to a significant financial estate, and if Marcus becomes unstable," he paused, "you become a target." The word settled. Target. Not victim, not survivor, something else entirely. Alicia absorbed that quietly, because for the first time, she wasn't just reacting to what Marcus had done. She was deciding what would happen next. Lorraine watched her closely. Most people, she said, would walk away, protect their new life, avoid the risk. Alicia didn't answer immediately. Her mind moved through everything. The courtroom, the $40, Jaden's question, "Why is Dad happy without us?" The silence stretched. Then Alicia leaned forward slightly. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm, certain. "I'm not most people." Nathaniel's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. Respect. "Then we proceed carefully," he said. Alicia nodded once, because this wasn't revenge. This wasn't anger. This was something else. Balance. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that restores what was taken. But what Alicia didn't know was that Marcus had already started to feel it. The pressure. The shift. The cracks forming in a system he thought he controlled. And when a man like Marcus begins to lose control, he doesn't retreat. He reacts. So when the truth finally comes for him, will he fall quietly or drag everything down with him, including the one person who now has everything to lose? She didn't raise her voice. She raised evidence, because revenge fades, but records don't. By the time the sun set, Alicia Carter had already made her decision. Not emotionally, not impulsively, strategically. She sat in Nathaniel Brooks's office again, but this time she wasn't the woman being told what she had. She was the one deciding what to do with it. Her posture was the same, straight, composed, but there was a shift in her presence now. Subtle, controlled. The kind of shift that doesn't ask for attention, but changes the direction of everything in the room. Jaden was not with her tonight. Lorraine had arranged for him to stay temporarily with a licensed caregiver, Mrs. Evelyn Ross, an older black woman in her early 60s with soft gray curls and warm, steady eyes. She had the kind of calm that came from raising 3 children of her own and losing one to illness years ago, a loss that had shaped her into someone deeply patient, deeply attentive. She didn't ask questions Alicia wasn't ready to answer. She simply created space where Jaden could feel safe. Inside the office, the air felt sharper, more focused. Nathaniel stood near the table, reviewing documents, while Lorraine leaned lightly against the edge, arms crossed, watching Alicia with quiet expectation. Alicia didn't sit immediately. She walked slowly to the glass window, looking out at the city below. The same city she had cleaned floors in just weeks ago. The same city that had taken everything from her, and then handed her something far more dangerous in return: power. She turned back. "I don't want revenge," she said. Her voice was calm, flat, certain. Nathaniel paused. Lorraine's gaze sharpened slightly. Alicia continued. "I want records." Silence, but not confusion, because they understood exactly what that meant. Not anger, not chaos, structure, proof. Nathaniel nodded slowly. "Then we build a case," he said. Lorraine pushed herself off the table, stepping forward. "Not just a case," she added. "A timeline, a pattern, something that doesn't just accuse, but proves." Alicia met her eyes. "Then let's start." 2 days later, the investigation began. Not loudly, not publicly, quietly, deliberately. Nathaniel brought in someone he trusted. His name was Victor Hale. Victor was in his early 40s, tall and lean with a weathered face that told its own story. His skin was pale, slightly rough, his jawline sharp beneath a short, uneven beard that looked more practical than styled. His dark hair was kept short, not for appearance but for convenience, and his eyes, gray, cold, observant, moved constantly, absorbing details others missed. He dressed simply, dark jacket, plain shirt, nothing that drew attention. Victor had once worked in financial crimes enforcement before leaving the system after a case collapsed due to internal corruption. That experience changed him. It stripped away any belief that truth automatically wins. Now he worked independently because control mattered more than rules. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was precise. "She's not looking for noise," Nathaniel told him. Victor glanced at Alicia briefly, then nodded once. "Good," he said. "Noise ruins cases." The work was methodical. Bank transfers were traced, accounts were mapped, names were connected. Victor worked through long nights, his laptop glowing in the dim office, screens filled with numbers, patterns, inconsistencies. He didn't rush, didn't speculate. Every piece of information had to lead somewhere real. Alicia watched part of it unfold, not everything, but enough to understand the depth of what Marcus had built. It wasn't sloppy, it wasn't desperate, it was structured, which made it worse, because it meant he knew exactly what he was doing. Lorraine handled the legal side, preparing documentation that would hold up under scrutiny. Every statement, every timeline entry, every connection had to be clean. No emotion, no assumption, just fact. And Alicia didn't interfere. She didn't need to, because this wasn't her battle to fight with words. It was something she had already chosen to win differently. On the fourth night, Victor placed a final folder on the table. "This is enough," he said. Alicia looked at it, not touching it yet. "What happens next?" she asked. Nathaniel answered, "We submit it." Lorraine added quietly, "And once we do, it moves beyond us." Alicia nodded slowly. She understood that. Because once truth is documented, it doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to the system. She stepped forward, placed her hand on the folder. For a brief moment, her mind flickered. The courtroom, the $40, the knock on her door, everything that led here. Then it was gone, replaced by something steadier, resolution. "Submit it," she said. Nathaniel closed the file. Lorraine exhaled quietly. Victor simply nodded. And just like that, it was done. No shouting, no confrontation, no warning. Just evidence, moving toward consequence. But what Alicia didn't see, what she couldn't see yet, was that the moment those records entered the system, Marcus's world would begin to shift, slowly at first, then all at once. Because men like Marcus don't fear accusations, they fear proof. And when the system finally knocks on his door, will he deny everything, or realize too late that the woman he tried to break has already built the case that will end him? While she signed for $30 million, he was signing away his freedom. And for the first time, he finally understood the cost of $40. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Alicia Carter held it between her fingers, hovering just above the final document, her name already printed neatly at the bottom. The room around her was silent, controlled, filled with the quiet professionalism of people who handled life-changing decisions every day. But for Alicia, this wasn't routine. This was the moment everything shifted from possibility to reality. Across the table, Nathaniel Brooks watched calmly, his posture unchanged, his eyes focused but unreadable. Lorraine Whitmore stood beside him, one hand resting lightly on the back of the chair, her gaze steady, almost protective. They had both seen this moment before, the exact second someone stepped into a new life. But Alicia wasn't smiling. She wasn't overwhelmed. She was present, because she understood something now that she didn't before. This wasn't just money. It was consequence. "Whenever you're ready," Nathaniel said. Alicia nodded slightly, and then she signed. At that exact moment, across the city, Marcus Carter's office door opened without warning. 3 people stepped in. The first was a tall black man in his early 40s, broad-shouldered with a clean, disciplined posture that spoke of years in law enforcement. His name was Detective Aaron Cole. His skin was a deep brown, his jawline strong, his expression firm but not aggressive, just certain. The kind of man who didn't rush because he didn't need to. Years spent dealing with financial crime had taught him patience, but also precision. When he moved, it meant something had already been decided. Behind him stood a younger officer, and beside them, a woman in a dark blazer holding a folder. Assistant District Attorney Claire Bennett. Claire was in her mid-30s, white, sharp-featured, with shoulder-length auburn hair and focused green eyes that carried both intelligence and intensity. She had built her career prosecuting white-collar crime, driven by a personal history. Her father had lost everything to financial fraud years ago, a loss that shaped her into someone who didn't just seek justice, she pursued it relentlessly. Marcus looked up from his desk, irritation flashing across his face. "What is this?" he asked, standing slowly. Detective Cole didn't answer immediately. He stepped forward. "Marcus Carter," he said clearly, "you are under investigation for financial fraud, embezzlement, and misappropriation of client funds." The words didn't land the way they were supposed to, not at first, because Marcus didn't process them as truth. He processed them as a mistake. "There's been some kind of misunderstanding," Marcus replied quickly, his voice controlled but tightening at the edges. "I'm a licensed attorney. You can't just—" "You can explain that," Claire Bennett interrupted calmly, "in court." She opened the folder, the same records Alicia had signed off on, the same proof that had moved quietly through the system, now standing directly in front of him. Marcus's eyes flicked across the pages, and for the first time, he saw it. Not accusation, not suspicion, evidence, complete, connected, unavoidable. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Vanessa stood near the window, frozen, her pale face losing color as she realized what was happening. Her usual composure, her control, slipped just enough to expose fear underneath. "This isn't possible," she whispered. But it was. Detective Cole stepped closer. "Turn around." Marcus didn't move, not because he didn't understand, but because he did. Too well. And then, everything collapsed at once. "Alicia," he said suddenly, his voice breaking through the tension. Not to them, to himself. Because now, he knew. This didn't come from nowhere. This came from her. "She did this," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Claire didn't respond, because it didn't matter who started it, only that it was real. "Turn around," Detective Cole repeated. This time, Marcus did. The sound of the handcuffs clicking into place was quiet, but final. Across the city, Alicia placed the pen down. Nathaniel slid the signed documents together, organizing them neatly. Lorraine exhaled softly, the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly. "It's done," Nathaniel said. Alicia nodded, but something in her expression shifted. Not relief, not satisfaction, awareness. Because she felt it, the moment something changed. Not in this room, somewhere else. Her phone buzzed lightly on the table. A message from an unknown number. She didn't open it immediately. She didn't need to, because she already knew. Back in the office, Marcus struggled slightly as the officers guided him toward the door. "Wait," he said, his voice rising now, losing control. "I need to make a call. I have rights." "You do," Claire said calmly. "You'll have the opportunity to use them." As they reached the doorway, Marcus stopped, just for a second. His voice broke through everything, louder now, desperate. "Alicia, please!" But she wasn't there, and even if she was, it wouldn't have changed anything. Alicia finally picked up her phone. She looked at the screen. One message, 3 words. "It's in motion." She read it once, then locked the screen. Her reflection stared back at her faintly through the glass table. Calm, unshaken, changed. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice settled into place. Not loud, not emotional, just certain. $40 a week. The words didn't leave her lips, but they didn't need to. Was your final offer. She stood up slowly, not rushing, not looking back, because the chapter she had survived was no longer the one she was living in. But what Alicia didn't know was that Marcus wouldn't be the only one going down, because the system she had activated was about to uncover something even bigger, something that connected more people, more money, and more damage than she had ever imagined. And when the truth spreads beyond Marcus, will Alicia still be in control of it, or become part of something far more dangerous than revenge? He didn't lose in court because of one woman. He lost because of everyone he had ever destroyed. The courtroom was full long before the hearing began, not with reporters, not with cameras, with people. People who had waited, people who had lost. Alicia Carter sat quietly in the second row, her posture straight, her hands resting gently in her lap. Jaden sat beside her, smaller than the wooden bench beneath him, his fingers curled around hers, holding on without needing to ask why. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he understood this mattered. Across the room, Marcus Carter sat at the defense table. Gone was the polished confidence, the tailored perfection. His suit was still expensive, but it no longer fit the same way. His shoulders were tense, his jaw tighter, the sharp control he once carried replaced with something fractured, something unstable beneath the surface. His beard was slightly overgrown, his eyes darker, heavier, like sleep had stopped visiting him days ago. Vanessa Reed sat a few seats behind him, alone. Her posture was stiff, her usual composure gone, replaced by quiet distance. Her blonde hair was pulled back tightly, almost harshly, her pale skin drawn, her expression hollow. She didn't look at Marcus, not once, because this was no longer a shared story. At the front of the courtroom sat Judge Harold Bennett, a man in his late 60s with silver hair, a stern expression, and eyes that had seen too many versions of the same mistake. His presence carried weight, not loud, not dramatic, but final. The kind of authority built over decades of watching truth unfold under pressure. "To proceed," he said, his voice steady. The first witness was called. An elderly woman slowly made her way to the stand. Her name was Mrs. Lillian Graves. She was small, fragile, her back slightly bent with age, her silver hair thin and pulled into a loose bun. Her skin was pale, marked with the quiet wear of time, and her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted herself in the chair. But her eyes were clear, determined. "I trusted him," she said, her voice soft but steady. The room leaned in. "My husband passed 5 years ago," she continued. "That money was all I had left, for my medication, for staying alive." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "He told me he would take care of it, that I didn't need to worry anymore." A pause. Her hands tightened slightly, but the money never came. Silence spread across the courtroom, not uncomfortable, heavy, real. Alicia's grip on Jaden's hand tightened slightly, not in fear, in understanding. The next witness stepped forward, a man in his early 40s, tall but worn down, his shoulders slightly slouched like he had been carrying something too heavy for too long. His name was Daniel Ortiz. His skin was olive-toned, his dark hair cut short but uneven, his face lined with exhaustion more than age. A faint scar ran along his jaw, a reminder of the accident that brought him here. "My wife needed surgery," he said, his voice low. "Urgent. We were told we'd get compensation after the case." He glanced briefly toward Marcus, then away. "I believed him," Daniel continued, "because he sounded like someone who knew what he was doing." A bitter breath escaped him. "We waited. Weeks. Months." His jaw tightened. "She didn't make it." The words landed harder than anything else. Alicia felt it, deep, sharp, undeniable. Jaden shifted slightly beside her, pressing closer. Alicia placed her other hand gently over his, steadying both of them. More witnesses followed. Different stories. Same pattern. Trust. Loss. Silence where help should have been. Each one added something Marcus couldn't erase. Not emotion, not anger. Truth. Marcus sat still as the testimonies unfolded. At first, he tried to maintain composure, his back straight, his face neutral. But with each story, each detail, something inside him shifted. His fingers tightened slightly against the table. His eyes dropped more often. His breathing became less controlled. Because this wasn't about one mistake. This was a pattern. And patterns don't disappear. Finally, the room quieted. Judge Bennett looked down at the documents before him, then back up. The evidence presented, he began, demonstrates a consistent and deliberate pattern of financial misconduct. Marcus didn't move, didn't speak. The court finds Marcus Carter, a pause, guilty. The words settled into the room like it belonged there. Not dramatic, not explosive, final. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly. Marcus stared forward, but his expression didn't hold anymore. Not control, not confidence, just reality. Alicia didn't react outwardly. She didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't shift in her seat. But inside, something aligned. Not satisfaction, not revenge, balance. The kind that doesn't need acknowledgement. The kind that simply happens. Jaden looked up at her. "Mom, is it over?" he whispered. Alicia looked down at him. Her expression softened, just slightly. "Yes," she said quietly. But even as the word left her lips, she knew. This wasn't the end. Because what Alicia didn't realize was that Marcus wasn't the only name connected to those records. The investigation hadn't stopped. It had expanded. And somewhere beyond this courtroom, someone else was watching, waiting, calculating. So now that Marcus had fallen, who would step forward next? And would Alicia be ready when the next truth came for her? She didn't win because she got rich. She won because she refused to become what broke her. The house wasn't what people expected. No gates, no marble floors, no endless glass walls reflecting a life too perfect to touch. Instead, Alicia Carter chose something quieter. A 2-story home at the edge of the city, surrounded by trees that moved gently with the wind, the kind of place where mornings felt slow and nights felt safe. The paint was soft, warm, lived in. The front porch held a wooden chair that creaked slightly when she sat down, but she liked that. It reminded her that not everything needed to be flawless to be real. Because Alicia wasn't building an image, she was building a life. Inside, Jaden's laughter echoed down the hallway. He ran barefoot across the polished wooden floor, a small basketball in his hands, his energy filling every corner of the house. His face looked different now, not because of what they had, but because of what they no longer carried. Fear, uncertainty, hunger. Alicia leaned against the doorway, watching him for a moment longer than necessary, because for her, this was the real victory. 3 weeks after the trial, Alicia stood in a different kind of room. Not a courtroom, not a law office, a community center. The walls were simple, painted in soft, neutral tones, the chairs arranged in a circle rather than rows. No hierarchy, no distance, just space. At the front stood a woman in her early 50s. Her name was Dr. Renee Holloway. She was tall, slender, with deep brown skin and natural gray curls framing her face. Her presence carried warmth but also authority, the kind that came from years of listening, guiding, rebuilding people who thought they couldn't be rebuilt. She had spent 2 decades working with women recovering from financial abuse and emotional trauma, shaped by her own past, once trapped in a controlling marriage that left her with nothing but the decision to start over. She understood. And that's why Alicia chose her. "This isn't charity," Alicia said, standing beside her. Her voice was steady, grounded. It's structure. The small group of women sitting in front of her watched quietly. Some looked tired, some guarded, some hopeful, but careful not to show it too quickly. "I know what it feels like," Alicia continued, "to lose everything and still be expected to survive." A pause. But survival isn't the goal. Her eyes moved across the room. Rebuilding is. The Carter Foundation didn't launch with headlines, no press conference, no announcement designed to impress strangers. It began with systems, legal support for women facing financial manipulation, emergency housing partnerships, access to childcare, education on financial independence. Every piece designed not just to help, but to prevent. Nathaniel handled the legal structure. Lorraine ensured compliance and protection. Victor quietly monitored financial integrity behind the scenes, making sure no one could ever use this system the way Marcus had used his. And Alicia? She stayed present, not above it, not separate from it, inside it. One afternoon, Alicia returned to a place she hadn't expected to visit again, the small apartment building where everything had fallen apart. The hallway smelled the same. The walls looked unchanged. But Alicia wasn't the same person walking through them. At the end of the corridor stood Mrs. Evelyn Ross, still gentle, still steady. Her soft gray curls framed a face that lit up slightly when she saw Alicia. "You didn't have to come back," Evelyn said with a small smile. Alicia stepped forward. "I wanted to," she replied. She handed her an envelope. Evelyn frowned slightly. "What's this?" "Support funding," Alicia said, "for the work you do, for families like mine." Evelyn looked down at the envelope, then back at Alicia. Her eyes softened, not because of the money, but because of the intention behind it. "You're different," Evelyn said quietly. Alicia smiled faintly. "No," she replied. "I just finally have the chance to be who I always was." That night, Alicia sat on the porch again. The air was cool. The city felt far away. Jaden was asleep inside, his small world finally stable, finally safe. Alicia leaned back, her gaze lifting toward the sky, her mind not racing, not replaying, just still. Because for the first time in a long time, there was nothing chasing her anymore. Her phone rested quietly beside her. No calls, no demands, no voices trying to take something from her. Just silence and choice. But even in that quiet, something remained. Not fear, not anger, awareness. Because Alicia understood now, money didn't fix what happened. It revealed it. It revealed who people were when they finally had the power to choose. And she had chosen, not to destroy, not to prove, but to build. Money didn't change her life. The thought settled gently in her mind. It revealed who she was always meant to be. A soft wind moved through the trees. The world felt steady. But far beyond her quiet home, in places she hadn't looked yet, her name was beginning to carry weight, influence, attention. And attention always brings something with it. So now that Alicia had rebuilt her life, would the world let her keep it? Or would power bring a new kind of battle she never saw coming? Jaden's laughter filled the room, light, free, the kind of sound Alicia once thought she might never hear again. Sunlight spilled across the floor, wrapping around a life she rebuilt piece by piece. She stood by the window, looking out at the same city that once watched her break, now watching her rise. No revenge, no noise. Just peace. If you were in her place, would you forgive or walk away? Comment below. And if you believe silence is the strongest comeback, hit subscribe. Alicia didn't look back. She didn't need to. He gave her $40. She turned it into $30 million and a life he could never touch again.